Picture this. One moment, you're just living your life, maybe flipping burgers after school.
Yeah.
And the next, a single event just tips the entire world on its axis.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into exactly that kind of moment, as experienced by a young man really on the cusp of his adult life when World War II exploded.
We're looking at the very beginning of that global conflict through the personal recollections of James Taylor Schultz, drawn from his document, WWII-stories.pdf.
Right.
Our aim is really to understand what it was like, to be a teenager in America as the war began, focusing on his initial reactions and, the path that led him into the military.
And what makes this so compelling, I think, are these firsthand accounts. They span from the immediate aftermath of Pearl Harbor all the way to his eventual return home.
Exactly. It gives us a truly unique sort of grand-level view of a monumental period in history.
Absolutely. In our scene, it's set in Morristown, New Jersey. A young James was balancing his studies at prep school with a job at a local eatery.
That eatery was run by the Day family, friends of James and his neighbors too. He worked there serving breakfast and lunch. You can almost picture it, right?
Yeah.
A classic counter setup, maybe 15, 20 seats. You've got the sizzle eggs, bacon, ham on the grill, the smell of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Later in the day, it would transition to hamburgers and sandwiches. He even mentions a special French fry dip they served.
Ha! A French fry dip. It was right there, though, amidst those everyday sounds of a bustling local spot that the world just shifted.
That's when President Roosevelt's voice came through the radio.
A date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces.
James remembered that immediate wave of fury washing over the nation.
It's a sentiment he directly connects, interestingly, to the feeling after 9/11.
Yeah.
That instant, powerful urge for a response.
Yeah, that shared anger.
A shared anger at being attacked on our own soil. From his perspective, it was a perfectly executed sneak attack by the Japanese. Sunday morning, servicemen completely off guard. He even mentions Admiral Yamamoto, recognizing the strategic planning from the Japanese side.
That feeling, that need to do something, was clearly strong in James. And his immediate thought wasn't like infantry or the regular Navy.
No, it was to become a fighter pilot. That was his ambition. So he headed straight to the recruiting offices in Newark, New Jersey, where all the branches had a presence.
But his ambition hit a bit of turbulence right away, didn't it?
It did. At the Naval Aviation Office, his enthusiasm was met with a pretty direct question. What about college? Simply finishing prep school wasn't enough. There was a required test, and, unfortunately, he didn't pass it. So dreams of flying were put on hold, at least for the moment.
But James wasn't easily discouraged. He then set his sights on the Marine Corps.
Right. At just 17, he still needed his parents' permission, naturally. He enlisted in January, which was actually a few months before his high school graduation in April. He was ready to serve, even before getting his diploma.
Wow. But there was wait.
Yeah, the military was expanding so rapidly, there was a backlog. He graduated in April, but the call for boot camp didn't actually come until July 1942.
Okay.
He was officially sworn in, I think, in New York City, but with that important caveat. You weren't really a Marine until you finished boot camp.
That makes sense. And that pivotal experience, boot camp, began with a long train journey down to Yamasee, South Carolina. That's the stop for Parris Island.
Right. He remembers a brief stop in Philadelphia where they were given a meal at the station. A small break in what sounds like a pretty unpleasant trip, honestly.
How so?
Well, it's an old coal-fueled train. Constant stops to get water for the steam engine.
Right.
And it's summer, so the windows are open, meaning you're just enduring this constant cloud of coal dust. Plus, trying to sleep, sitting upright, not exactly comfortable.
No, doesn't sound it. Yet, despite all that discomfort, James's mind was likely focused on the future, right? On becoming a Marine, something he clearly felt a strong pull towards.
Definitely. And he connected with other recruits on that train, guys from the New York and New Jersey area, and with a bit of, youthful confidence. He figured his hunting experience would give him an edge on the rifle range.
He was a hunter.
Yeah. He'd grown up hunting squirrels with a .22 rifle, and he was familiar with shotguns too, even mentioned a rare .9 gauge. So he thought he'd probably outperform the city kids.
And did he?
Well, he did achieve the rank of sharpshooter, which is good, but he also quickly realized a lot of other guys were just as skilled, or maybe even better. Bit of a reality check.
Right. So his arrival at Parris Island itself, quite an initiation, he described it.
Oh, yeah. Transported in what he called cattle trucks, and immediately met by the recruits already in training the boots, yelling that classic charming greeting, "You'll be sorry."
Welcoming committee.
Exactly. And as soon as they arrived, formed into platoons, personal belongings were just gone, confiscated.
Wow.
Then the rapid-fire issue of basic uniforms, skivvies, socks, the field shoes they call boondockers, leggings, dungarees, field jackets, the green uniform, leather belts, and that distinctive fore and aft cap.
Which apparently had a less formal nickname.
Yes, one we probably shouldn't repeat here. His civilian clothes were all packed up, shipped back home. Life in the wooden barracks was instantly hyper-regimented. Stacked bunks, precise rows, incredibly strict standards for making beds, stowing gear, everything.
And the group punishment aspect.
Crucial. A core part of Marine boot camp, then and now, really. If one guy messed up, the entire group paid the price.
Builds teamwork, I guess. Or resentment.
Both, probably. But the goal was building teamwork, collective responsibility. Punishment could be anything from failing rifle inspection leading to extra cleaning, or hours and hours of close order drill, just marching under discipline.
So this intense 12-week boot camp, what were the main focuses?
Core military skills. Huge emphasis on the rifle marksmanship, cleaning, handling. The bayonet assault course, which was famously tough, and tons of time on the firing range.
And he mentioned the rifles they used initially.
Yeah, Springfield '03 rifles.
Yeah.
World War I era weapons. Quite remarkable when you think about it.
Definitely. And this demanding period, July to September 1942, it coincided with a major event in the Pacific, right?
Absolutely. The American landing on Guadalcanal happened in August 1942. So while these recruits are deep in training, the news of that massive, bloody campaign is undoubtedly filtering through. Big stakes.
He remembered the drill instructors, like Pete Pappas.
He did, with, a mix of feelings, resentment during the tough parts for sure, but later an appreciation for their role in preparing them for combat. He said the point wasn't really to eliminate recruits, but as he put it, to whip you in shape, make you a Marine.
And by the time he graduated, his mindset has shifted. He felt ready, wanted to fight.
Definitely. He also understood the basic structure by then. You start as a rifleman, part of a squad with a squad leader. 4 squads make a platoon, maybe 20, 30 guys led by a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Platoons form a company under a captain.
And so on, up the chain, battalion, division.
Right. Major, lieutenant colonel commanding a battalion, and then building up to larger divisions.
Okay, so after boot camp, more training, practice landings.
Yep. Practiced amphibious landings in the Chesapeake Bay. Kind of funny, they got there by bus.
By bus to practice a beach landing.
Apparently so. He shared a story about some recruit getting a bit cocky, and a Navy chief, petty officer, a Swabi chief, he called him, put him in his place real quick. A humbling moment, reinforcing those boot camp lessons.
These training maneuvers weren't always smooth, though.
No, he mentioned instances of tanks accidentally running over communication wires, little things, but they highlight the real challenges of coordinating large-scale operations, something that would sadly be an issue later in actual combat, like at Tarawa.
And the Marine Corps was expanding rapidly.
This period saw the formation of new divisions, like the 4th Marine Division breaking off from the 3rd. He also mentioned that little rivalry between the East Coast guys from Parris Island and the West Coast Marines trained near San Diego, the Hollywood Marines.
Ha! Hollywood Marines. But James's path forward hit a snag, didn't it? An injury.
Yeah, unfortunately. Later during training, he suffered a pretty bad elbow injury, required hospitalization at a naval facility.
And the treatment sounds rough.
It does. They tried putting a pin right through his elbow and hanging his arm with a strap. It was painful, unstable. He said even moving in his sleep could re-break it.
Ouch.
He even talked to an orthopedic surgeon trained at the Mayo Clinic about a better procedure, an open reduction, but the Navy wouldn't allow it at the time.
And just to add insult to injury?
Literally. He got cramps in the hospital ward, probably from shared blankets, just miserable. Yeah. And incredibly frustrating for him, being stuck there while his unit shipped out overseas. That feeling of being left behind.
He was facing a medical discharge at one point.
They considered it. But James absolutely refused. He argued, I signed up to fight, I'm a Marine. He wouldn't take it.
Good for him. So he got leave instead.
Eventually, yeah. Went undercover. He even borrowed a dress blues uniform with corporal stripes, which made his mom worry because he wasn't an NCO yet.
Did he wear it out?
He did. Wore the borrowed uniform to a local football game.
When did this injury happen in the timeline?
It was several months after the Guadalcanal landing started in August 42. That campaign was brutal, lasted 6 months. So while that was raging, James was dealing with this injury and recovery.
So after leave, back to the hospital.
Yep, had the pin removed, got a cast. He even told a story about a prank. Fellow patients hid his clothes while he showered. A young nurse walked in. Quite the surprise for her, apparently.
Oh, dear. And once you recover?
He was reassigned. Not to his original unit, but to the new 4th Marine Division. Regaining strength in that arm took time, though. He mentioned diving off a ship later, and the impact with the water felt like his arm might just tear off.
Oh, yikes. But his time with the 4th Division was short.
Relatively, yeah. Soon he got orders transferring him again, this time to the 2nd Marine Division, which meant leaving behind the guys he'd just trained with. But new bonds formed quickly in that environment.
And he mentioned one particularly close friend.
Bob Ray from Oildale, California. He spoke very highly of Bob, said he was like a brother. They really looked out for each other.
That camaraderie is so vital. So the 2nd Division heading towards Saipan.
That was the next major step. Before they deployed, they got a briefing that included a rather unique warning about the local agriculture on Saipan. Specifically, don't eat the local vegetables.
Why not?
Because of unsanitary fertilization practices, using human waste from makeshift toilets in homes. So, yeah, stick to the rations.
Good advice. Landing on Saipan itself was a huge operation.
Massive. The 1st and 2nd Marine Divisions, plus the Army's 26th Infantry Regiment, and James remembered his feeling hitting the beach. Just one word. Scared to death.
I can only imagine. They shipped out from Maui.
Yeah, on a troop transport. A 3 or 4 day journey. Life aboard was pretty standard. Cleaning rifles, exercising, playing cards constantly. And, as he put it, lying about your past to kill time. He also recalled bringing some canned sardines that were apparently terrible.
Did they know where they were going?
Not until just before the landing. Officers got briefed first, then smaller groups of enlisted men. Maps came out, objectives outlined. Securing the airfield was priority number 1.
And the intelligence. What did they expect?
They were told to expect a large Japanese force, maybe around 140,000 troops, heavily certified positions known as the Saipan Wall.
Why was Saipan so critical?
Strategic location. With the development of long-range bombers like the B-17 and especially the new B-29 Superfortress, Saipan was within range of the Japanese mainland.
Ah, Tokyo.
Exactly. Losing Saipan meant Tokyo was vulnerable to bombing raids. James later saw hundreds of B-29s arrive after the island was secured, and he noted that the Enola Gay actually took off from nearby Tinian for the Hiroshima mission.
Wow. Before the landing, though, that tradition.
Steak and eggs. The classic pre-combat meal. Maybe a last taste of something good before hitting the beach.
Yeah, and the fleet offshore.
He described the scale of the naval fleet as almost unbelievable. Just a massive assembly of ships. Then hitting the beach. Pure chaos. Scrambling for cover, the immediate desperate need to move forward, get off the beach.
And nights must have been terrifying.
He said nights were filled with constant fear, just the gnawing uncertainty of surviving until dawn. He also shared a haunting memory, though it might have been from Tinian shortly after, of seeing a young soldier killed right near him during his first landing.
Just brutal. And after the initial landing,
bulldozers moved in quickly, filling shell holes, trying to get that airfield operational, the B-29s as fast as possible.
air support.
Crucial. Marine Corps planes, Corsairs, Hellcats, and Army Air Corps P-47 Thunderbolts, sometimes strafing incredibly close to the front lines.
He had a story about that, didn't he?
Yeah, directing ground control for an Army strike. He called for a really tight strafe, very close to their position, and apparently it took out a lot of Japanese troops. Risky, but effective.
And the daily grind, evening routine.
Survival mode, digging deep foxholes every night, setting up defensive lines, machine guns, mortars, Browning automatic rifles, the bar-Rs, and rations. K-rations are the canned C rations.
What was the difference again?
C rations were a bit more substantial. Canned meats, crackers, maybe a small dessert, often included cigarettes too. K rations were more compact individual meals.
He mentioned issues with coordinating the advance sometimes.
Yeah, difficulties maintaining a solid front line. He recalled instances where Army units struggled to keep pace with the Marines, creating dangerous gaps. This led to the famous or infamous General Howland Mad Smith relieving the Army commander involved.
And the tragedy at Marpy Point.
Just awful. Japanese civilians, terrified of capture, were jumping off cliffs to their deaths rather than surrender. Marines tried using bullhorns to persuade them it was safe, but many wouldn't listen.
Heartbreaking, seeing mothers with children.
He said despite them being the enemy, there was compassion among the Marines witnessing that. Just a terrible sight. They also pushed through the heavily damaged main town, Garapan.
How long did the Saipan campaign last?
5 or 6 weeks of intense, brutal fighting.
And the feeling when those B-29s finally started taking off from Saipan?
Profound. He vividly remembered watching them lift off in 1944, loaded with incendiary bombs, heading for Tokyo. It felt like a major turning point. They had finally broken the Saipan Wall.
A huge moment. But Iwo Jima was still to come, of course.
Right, that wouldn't be until the spring of 45.
After Saipan was secured, was there any downtime?
A brief period of what they called relaxation, which apparently involved finding a large bottle of sake somewhere.
You throw away.
Yeah, it led to a bit of a party. Most of them weren't used to that much strong alcohol, so the result was, as he put it, getting El Smasho and then El Sicko.
Huh. Sounds about right. Then it was on to Tinian.
The next objective, the neighboring island. They did a backdoor landing, catching the remaining Japanese forces by surprise.
And they encountered some effective Japanese weapons there.
Yes, specifically a Nambu machine gun. He noted it was a very good, well-made weapon, unlike some of the poorly made Japanese rifles they'd seen. Also mentioned the danger of Japanese knee mortars.
Tragically, that Nambu gun.
Yes, it killed a soldier James had befriended, Mel Tietz. A tough loss.
What kind of landing craft did they use for Tinian?
Primarily Higgins boats. He actually preferred them in that situation, sometimes easier or faster depending on the beach.
So they took out the machine gun.
They did. Grenades, small arms fire, allowed them to get troops ashore quickly, battalion strength in just a few hours. Tinian itself was secured relatively fast, maybe 10 days to 2 weeks.
And this was where they first used C2 explosive.
That's what he recalled, yeah. The plastic explosive putty. Used to seal off caves after trying to get occupants to surrender. They'd learned some basic Japanese phrases.
Like what?
Phrases like, Derekinasai bukinashine, maybe meaning come out without weapons. Also, Derekoi, which he thought meant come out dog or something insulting, so they switched to Derekinasai, hoping it sounded more like friend. Some phrases were probably garbled attempts at drop your weapons or don't be afraid.
Trying to communicate under fire. Were there Japanese escape plans?
Didn't seem like it. Their main forces, especially naval support, were lost at Saipan. Escape wasn't really an option.
And Guam was happening around the same time.
Right. The 3rd Marine Division retook Guam concurrently with the Saipan-Tinian operations. And despite the efforts, most Japanese soldiers still refused surrender due to the cultural dishonor, though some did give up.
James had 2 specific memories of Tinian that stood out.
He did. One was a massive monsoon rain. It completely flooded their foxhole. They had to hold their rifles up to keep them dry. But he said the rainwater itself was actually warm and kind of pleasant to sit in.
Huh. A warm bath in a foxhole? What was the other?
Witnessing a Japanese officer, immaculately dressed, sword and all, walking down a path, seemed intent on committing seppuku, ritual suicide. But he was gunned down before he could. A stark image.
Wow. And after Tinian, the famous sick bay cocktail hour.
Yeah, apparently a common practice. Go to sickbay, get some 190 proof alcohol, which came in these metal cans like turpentine containers.
Seriously.
Then get powdered juice mix from the mess hall, grapefruit, orange, whatever. Mix it all up in a cleaned out Blitz can, a 5-gallon Jeep gas tank. Enough for everyone. Often aided by the chief pharmacist mate who looked the other way, or maybe even helped.
Resourceful. So after Tinian, back to Saipan for R&R.
R&R, and more training, yeah. But with Garapan destroyed, there weren't exactly bars or much recreation, mostly just training exercises. Mortar practice was a big one.
He mentioned an officer, Remington.
First Lieutenant Remington. Seemed like a good guy, friendly. They'd even make friendly bets involving Remington's booze ration during mortar practice.
And James got pretty good with mortars.
He and Bob Ray did. He explained the whole setup. The base plate for stability, the tube, the tripod. They used an aiming stake 10 feet out as ground zero. Then used traversing mechanisms, sometimes compasses for aiming. Radio operators were key with those bulky PBX communication systems.
PBX, like an old office phone system?
Sorta, yeah. A private branch exchange for internal comms. James and others often had to carry the heavy spools of wire for the radio guys, and the mortar shells themselves had incremental gunpowder packets you could add or remove to adjust the range.
Sounds complex. During this training, they thought Japan was next.
That was the assumption, yeah. Training with tanks, artillery, everyone figured the home islands were the ultimate target.
But then he got summoned.
Yeah, to Lieutenant Colonel Richard Nottingham's headquarters. Nottingham was older, college class of 31, had a relaxed chat with James, asked him if he still wanted to fly.
And did he?
The interest was still there, definitely. But the opportunity just hadn't come up again. Flying wasn't in the cards at that point.
So the actual next target wasn't Japan, but Okinawa.
Correct. Okinawa. Hugely strategic island, seen as the final staging area needed for any potential invasion of mainland Japan.
And this was primarily an army operation.
Primarily, yes. The Army's 10th Corps was in command. But the Marines, designated USM Corps Reserve, were thrown in right at the start.
How was the landing? Fierce resistance.
Surprisingly, no. They waded ashore, annoyed about getting their boots wet, but there was basically no Japanese resistance right on the beaches.
That must have been unexpected.
Very. The Japanese had changed tactics. Instead of defending the beaches, they'd pulled back inland to heavily fortified positions. Pillboxes, caves.
He described the pillboxes.
Yeah, really deadly. Heavily fortified concrete bunkers, but with compartmentalized interiors. So even if you breached one section, defenders in other sections could still fire on you. Incredibly dangerous to assault.
And there were rumors before they left Saipan.
Rumors about some secret weapon, something that could be decisive. Adds to the tension, you know.
Definitely. All this time, those B-29s are still flying from Saipan.
Constantly, day and night, heading for Japanese mainland villages, mostly now, with incendiary bombs. Targeting the wood and paper structures common outside the big cities like Tokyo. He mentioned the accuracy of the Norden bomb site.
But also saw some crashes.
Sadly, yes. Mechanical failures sometimes brought them down. A tough sight.
So towards the very end, James is on Okinawa.
Right. And he gets sent down to the docks to board an LCS landing craft support, a tanker version.
And that's when the news breaks.
News of the first atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. He didn't recall feeling the blast itself. Okinawa is pretty far away, but acknowledged the concussion must have traveled a long way.
They weren't sure how far Okinawa was from Japan.
No, he guessed maybe 50 to 150 miles. It's actually closer to 1,000 miles to the main islands. But at that point, the war wasn't over yet.
So their ship was heading towards Japan.
That was the plan. Heading north, expecting really fierce resistance when they got there.
But then,
Completely unexpectedly, the ship just turns around. Makes a 180-degree turn. News came through. The second atomic bomb had been dropped on Nagasaki. And then, not long after that, the announcement came over the ship's loudspeakers. The war is over.
must have been incredible.
He said cheers just erupted, jubilation, the relief must have been immense. The journey back to Hawaii on that tanker was peaceful. No blackout, no zigzagging to avoid subs. Air cover, just safe. They even got some fun Liberty time in Pearl Harbor.
And the final trip home.
On a CVL, a small carrier converted from a troop ship. Not entirely smooth sailing, though.
Oh, what happened?
He mentioned a really mean Navy cook on board, just giving them pointless, hard tasks. James regretted not confronting him, but he was worried it might mess up his chance at the V-12 program, the Navy college program. Didn't want to rock the boat, literally.
Understandable. Then finally, San Francisco.
Arriving at Treasure Island. And he described that moment, sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge. Just overwhelming emotion. I made it! Yeah. Called his parents, got some money wired, enjoyed Liberty in San Francisco, went to the famous Top of the Mark bar, said people were buying him drinks left and right, so happy to see the troops coming home, stayed in barracks there for a bit.
And the discharge process?
Much less glamorous. Happened back east at Hadnot Point, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Kind of unceremonious, really.
He met someone on the train trip back east.
Briefly, yeah. At the station in L.A., a UCLA student named Marilyn Burnside. Just a fleeting connection.
Then the official papers arrived later.
By mail, yeah. Discharge papers, plus these commemorative books about the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions.
Right.
He also had an encounter at Lejeune with a colonel trying to recruit him to stay in, go to platoon leader school.
What did James think?
He felt like, he already had the combat experience. School wasn't really what he was looking for then.
Fair enough. And then, back home, met his future wife.
Pretty quickly, yeah. Met Barbara Peterson. He said it was an immediate connection, just knew right away. They got married less than a year later, July 1947, in Mendham, New Jersey. He admitted feeling a bit self-conscious initially because her older sister was, older, and he felt young.
Newlyweds starting out. Where did they live?
Briefly with his father, then moved to Levittown, Long Island, that famous post-war development for returning veterans. They rented for $65 a month.
Rented, not bought.
His father advised rent.
What about work?
Started at Dun and Bradstreet.
Yeah.
But he was commuting with a VP who kind of hinted the salary ceiling wasn't very high. That got him looking elsewhere.
Smart move.
Led him to a sales job at Cone Mills, a textile company, through a connection named Greg Ewell. Started in the New York market.
And then moved.
transferred to the Chicago office, eventually became assistant office manager there. They moved to Highland Park, Illinois, found a house right on the lake. James really enjoyed Chicago.
But his wife didn't.
Didn't love the weather, apparently. So when Cone Mills offered him a transfer to the San Francisco office, she was thrilled.
Even though James was hoping for the Chicago manager job?
Yeah, he was a bit disappointed initially, but Barbara's enthusiasm for California won out. They lived in Burlingame for a couple of years.
And then back to New York.
Another transfer. But California kept calling them back.
So they returned.
Eventually, yes. Lived briefly in Oakland, then found a rental in Berkeley. They actually negotiated the rent down by promising the landlady they'd fix up the yard. Planted juniper bushes, he remembered. Furnished the place going to auctions. They had a housekeeper, Marion, who became a real friend.
Sounds like they settled in, made friends.
Very much so. Met their neighbors in Berkeley, Donna and Buster, or Buzz Gibb. Became incredibly close friends. Told a funny story about playing a pegboard game with Buzz, who was super competitive. And another about a business trip he took with Buzz to Portland and Seattle. Visiting the oyster bar, loving these Yukina oysters, even though they were apparently Japanese oysters. Some antics involving oyster stew back home. Sounds like they had a lot of fun together.
Those friendships are so important. Did the Gibbs help them find a permanent place?
They did. Helped them buy their first house in Lafayette on Upper Happy Valley Road. They also joined the local Sleepy Hollow Recreational Association, became part of the community.
A long journey from that restaurant in Morristown.
An incredible journey. And so we reached the end of James Taylor Schultz's compelling account.
This deep dive into James's personal experiences, it really offers us a uniquely powerful perspective on those monumental events of World War II.
Absolutely. We've witnessed his remarkable journey, haven't we? That swift, almost jarring transition from, the familiar rhythms of teenage life in a quiet New Jersey town.
Right.
To the brutal, undeniable realities of combat thousands of miles away in the Pacific.
His recollections just paint such a vivid picture. It's this compelling blend of fear, obviously, in the face of unimaginable danger, but also those profound, enduring bonds of camaraderie forged in shared hardship. Incredible resilience, too.
And even surprising moments of humor, like the sickbay cocktails. Levity amidst the absolute chaos of war.
It really makes you consider how profoundly ordinary lives are impacted, just completely changed forever by these extraordinary historical events.
Yeah, and it underscores just how vital it is that we preserve these individual narratives, these personal windows into the past. They offer something history books alone can't capture. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a really remarkable personal account.